are you feeling, you know, just ahead of the fight, behind closed doors, obviously, which is unfortunate, but obviously it's a big night coming up, and we're here in the UAE, and I guess your fights don't tend to last too long, so this one might be a blink and you'll miss it job.
Well, you never can tell, can you? No, I feel really good. It is a shame. I was kind of hoping for the world situation to clear up a bit so that we could enter back into an audience, you know, because I do feel like I am more of a showman than just a fighter. I like to put on a show. People pay money, they give their time, which is more valuable than the money they spend. And I feel like they deserve a show. So being that my fights tend to last only a few seconds, I feel like I need to kind of over-exaggerate a performance and give people something to talk about when they go home.
So it's been over a year. I think it's July of last year since you last fought. How does that kind of play into things? I mean, are you conscious of that, and if it, you know, if the effect that might have on your performance? Do you worry about that at all?
I don't worry about anything. I'm such a chilled person. No, not at all. Do you know what? I've gone longer stints when I was wrapped up in a situation with ONE FC. I think it was like 18 months or something like that I hadn't fought. And it doesn't affect me. I think it affects you if you allow it to, and that tends to be life in general. You know, things can bother you if you allow them to. Nah, man, I'm just, look, you know, if you can see this view right now, it's pretty incredible. I'm just having fun. So what happens tomorrow happens. Really, I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in my abilities, as any pro athlete should be. And I'm just looking forward to having a good time.
And just looking at your profile, Chai, it's quite intriguing when you look at the numbers, because, you know, you're 37, you fought, 10 times, or 8 wins, 2 draws in your career. You're quite lightly fought, and I know that you've batted back a few approaches from the likes of Dana White at UFC and Bellator as well. Can you kind of just give us an overview of how your career's panned out? Because if I'm not wrong, you're quite a late starter to the fight game.
Yeah, it's been 10 years now. I think my first fight I was 27, I believe. I started really late, but it was something that I transitioned to from basketball really smoothly. Right. I've always, you know, I played the power forward position, and that's probably, if not the most physical position in the game, because those guys are not only big, they're agile. You know, they're not like stuck in the mud like centers. And I always thrived in that sort of Dennis Rodman mentality of just going after everything. And he was not most people's inspiration, but he was a form of inspiration for me. And it translated into fighting. And I've just really enjoyed the journey, because I feel like I treat it like with respect. It's martial arts, you know. I don't see it as just something to do, or, you know, a career because it's cool. I feel like I have developed as a human being on a much more rapid pace than I would have if I didn't do this. And that, to me, is more valuable than any accolade or accomplishment within the sport. It's taught me to be a better person overall, and a very disciplined person. So, no, I guess the route, I'm here for a reason. I'm big on being treated fair as a person, so therefore treat me fair as an athlete. And a lot of I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there's been a lot of instances where I don't feel I have been valued. And if you don't value me, then I don't need to be there, you know. So that's happened on a few occasions, but here I feel valued, so I'm here and I'm happy. It's more important for me to be happy than it is to be wealthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've said that time and time again. I've read a lot of interviews that you've given, Chai, and that seems to be the prevailing message, that it's about your happiness. It's about you finding, in a lot of ways, a serenity within your life. You've mentioned there that you have felt undervalued. You look at UFC, you look at Bellator, you've knocked back offers. There'll be a lot of fight fans that are watching this that think, wait a minute, you knock back UFC. Is that the nuts and bolts of it? Did they just not respect you and value enough, essentially?
Yeah, you know, a lot of, I guess, I want to say uneducated, that's kind of a negative way of putting it, but I guess the layman of the fight game don't understand that might be most people's end goal, but my end goal isn't to be the world champion or to be the UFC #1 or the Bellator champ. That isn't my end goal. The end goal is to go on and live healthy. So this is just something that's kind of like a moment in time for me. It's something that I'm doing now. It will be something that I no longer do, and I move on. So I feel like the most important thing for me is respect. I like to be respected. I respect people. I know that my character, I get into character and I'm quite loud and brash, but that's entertainment, and it's just a quality of my true character that I just amplify. And I don't appreciate lack of appreciation, because I do give my all, the kind of things have been put on the line. So I think, yeah, there's been that a few times where people just they throw numbers at you, and I'm like, man, I could die in there. Realistically, I could die. Something could happen. Something could go wrong. I could die. My family could die. We deserve to be looked after for this. And I feel like MMA athletes in probably the most under cricketers make more money than MMA guys. That's saying something,
You talk about Chai, your evolution as a person, and the fact that this sport and this discipline has helped you grow as a person, to evolve and to become a better human being. I'm really interested to read your comments about Jon Jones. I know you two had a difference of opinion, and it seemed like you didn't hold his conduct against him, because you kind of said that's just the way he is. That's what makes him special. He's got demons, but they manifest themselves in this greatness. And I'm kind of curious to know why it is that so many greats, particularly in the fight game, have had these kind of issues, these mental demons that they've battled outside of either the ring or the octagon. What's your take on that?
I personally believe it's the pressure, because there is a pressure. Whether you say that you're cool, calm, and collected, like I'm quite a chilled, relaxed person, but there is an intense amount of pressure, because you're expected. It's about people's expectations, and sadly, a lot of people, a lot of athletes might have the skill set or the attributes to be a fantastic athlete. It might just be like a freak of nature, right? But then they might have the mindset within the sport. But then when the lights are off and you go home, how are they coping with real life? They might have situations at home that they're demons, and that they can't escape those. They might have post-trauma. These sort of things are delicate and difficultly managed. Some people just can't do that. They can't cope. They just know how to do one thing. You get those guys that only know how to fight. That's all they have. And I feel sorry for those guys, because is that all you have? Is that the only value you feel like you present to people, present to the world, is you're fighting? So what happens when that stops? Because inevitably it does stop. And you see so many guys carrying on way past their sell-by date. They should have stopped a long time ago. And they can cause some serious damage. And I feel like that's because a lack of self-love, a lack of self-appreciation. And it sounds very, kind of generic and like, I don't know, hippie, or whatever however you want to see it. But it's so true. And the further I've gone in my career, the older I've gotten, I appreciate these values much more.
Can I ask on that, Chai, because there'll be a lot of people again watching this thinking, well, common wisdom would tell you, and Robbie and I have spoken about this in our show numerous times, that in a lot of ways, if we look at a Tiger Woods, for example, well-documented issues away from the golf course, but he had blinkers on, he had a single-mindedness where, and again, we've not spoken to Tiger, but from the outside, it looks as if all he had was golf. Golf was his outlet. You've said there that you're a little bit more balanced. Can people who are balanced still make it to the top of their sport? Does conventional wisdom not tell you you've got to immerse yourself, body and soul, in order to reach the pinnacle?
I believe so, yes. And there'll be plenty of people that disagree. One thing I will say is you do have to have an obsession with what you're doing. So there is an obsession, but if it overwhelms you, then I feel that that's a problem. That can be a problem, because winning, as euphoric and hands in the air, singing song and dance about it, as that can be, a loss can be devastating. And that can send people over the rails. And too many times you see the greatest of all time in their era, they lose, and then they lose again, and then they lose again, and they lose again. And I feel like that's because the same way they held on to that air of invincibility for their streak, when they lose it, they never get it back. Very rarely do they get it back. And I feel like that's because there is no balance. It's all or nothing with these people. Now me, I could happily lose on Friday night and be at peace with it because I know that I'll give my all. And that for me is, I'm calm with it. It's not a problem. So I know that either way, I'm going to feel the same. So there's zero fear, there's zero pressure, there's zero expectation. I'm just going to go out there and do what I know I can do. If it doesn't go my way, it doesn't go my way. But I know that I gave my best because I can't lie to myself. You know?
Well, it was interesting just to get your thoughts on the comparison between the aftermath of both when Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz Jr. and Deontay Wilder lost to Tyson Fury. Now, listen, we're not in their camps, we're not in their heads, so we don't exactly know what was going on. But it was interesting that Anthony got onto his social media the day after, made no excuses, congratulated Andy Ruiz Jr., applied himself, came back and won a rematch.
Yeah.
Deontay made a bunch of excuses about the heaviness of his suit and then just basically went AWOL and has not really been heard from much since. And it kind of casts doubt and aspersions on how he's going to get on in that rematch. Is that the toughest part? Because obviously you've not taken a loss in your career, but when especially in fighting more so than in other sports, when you take that first loss, it can be such a watershed moment. As to how you deal with it says a lot about your character.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I have one loss in kickboxing. And that was the single best experience of my fight career, was losing. Because until you lose, you always have this question in your head. What's it going to be like when I lose? How will I feel? How will I deal with that? Is it going to be the end of my career? Will I be able to come back? And as soon as I lost, I remember laughing. Like I got to the back and I was laughing. I was like, nothing's changed. Like it's exactly the same. Like my son still loves me. My family is still there. My friends are still there. They're still there. I still get to have my ceremonial rum at the end of the fight. And nothing changed. I'm going to go on. People are still smiling. People are still breathing. People were entertained no matter what. So I'm at peace. Like I'm completely at peace with the idea of losing. Obviously, my focus and goal is to win. But it's here, man. It really, really, like, I'm sounding like a preacher right now. But it just doesn't matter. Nothing matters. It doesn't matter if you win. It doesn't matter if you lose. It matters if you take part. And too many people are sort of wrapped up in, I must win this, or I better not lose that. That's like a negative way of looking at the positive, the good and the bad. I'm just taking part. I'm here for the ride. In 100 years, I hope people still remember me as the guy that just had fun, enjoyed his life, lived it to the full. But I'm not getting wrapped up in the idea of being the best or being the worst. I'm just being.
Can I ask you, you were in the training camp of Daniel Cormier. We go back to 2016. I mean, it is refreshing to listen to someone in the fight game with the outlook that you have. Does that rub off on people? Like Daniel, for example, give us a semblance of his character. And I mean, what is the reaction? Because you do look as if you're one of those guys that's always smiling. You come bouncing into the gym. You've got a good energy, a good aura around you. Is that embraced by other fighters? Is Daniel someone who would take some of what you're kind of offering and package that up into himself?
Absolutely. And you know what? This is the only thing that I can say I agree with Jon Jones on, is he said that if you listen to me, I just sound like Daniel Cormier with an English accent. He literally, like, me and Daniel got on so well because we're very similar. Like, DC doesn't take anything too serious. He's just always laughing and joking, but knows how to focus and train. But then he's laughing and joking. Or we'd be sparring and he'd be laying on top of me with his big belly and we'd just be talking smack to each other while we'll be chatting and kind of inspiring each other to get better, you know? And that's one thing that I think is the reason I fit in so well over there, is because me and DC, who's obviously the captain at AKA, we shared a lot of similarities in our characters.
Are you ruling out the possibility, Chai, that you could one day get into that octagon in the UFC? Is that an absolute no-go, or is there still a chance that we may see you?
Nothing is absolute. So I'm happy with, I will go where things take me. If I stay here because here is respecting me and it just works, I'm happy, then I'll stay here. I don't have to be anywhere to feel accomplished. I'm not doing this to feel accomplished or to prove anything to anybody else but myself. But you never know. I've had the WWE knock on the door, so you never know, right?
We spoke to was it Drew? It was Drew McIntyre, the champion,
oh, yeah.
not so long ago. One of the only Scottish world champions in any sport in WWE. But that being said, Chai, is there anyone you'd like to fight? I mean, is the Jon Jones fight? You're probably too big for Jon Jones, in all honesty. But is there anyone that you would like to fight?
If I say I would like, as an athlete, I feel like I like to call myself an athlete because I train like one, rather than just a fighter. I think anybody can be a fighter, but not anyone can be an athlete. I firmly believe that the fight with Jon Jones would be ideal. It's somebody I would like to fight. But there isn't anybody else that I'd like to fight, because I just fight whoever's around, whoever's next, whoever wants to. But that's somebody I would like to, because of the personal gripe that I have with him. And I feel like the man is a bully, and bullies need to be bullied so that they stop and they change their way. And I would like to be the person to do that. I would shake the guy's hand after. But you can't get away with some of the things that you say and do, that behavior, and expect to just coast through life. That's not how it works. And people that compete with him don't have a personal problem with him. But we've had some pretty personal exchanges, and I don't like that. I wouldn't let a random person in the street do it, so I wouldn't let him do it. And if that is how it would be settled, and I had the opportunity to change the way that man treats people, then happily, I would do that.
Widely considered, Chai, as the greatest MMA practitioner is Jon Jones by an awful lot of observers. Could you beat him? And if so, what weaknesses do you see? Where do you think, when you eye up Jon Jones, any weaknesses that you think you could get at?
Absolutely. His ego would be his downfall. He has an ego. So as an MMA fighter, as an athlete, the guy is probably the best pound for pound in the world, right? I do not argue that. You hear that, John? I said that you are pound for pound the best in the world, but I could still knock him out. Every fight start, I think his ego would have him stand and try to prove that he could outstrike me. His ego would do that, and that would be his problem. That would be his demise. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I do believe.
And in terms of the fighters that you enjoy watching the most in the UFC, Chai, I mean, there's so many great talents that have come along throughout the years. Obviously, Anderson Silva. We've got Khabib Nurmagomedov now, who's just really just running roughshod through the lightweight division. Conor has obviously been a huge draw for the sport. Is there one guy that you, or one girl, for example, that you particularly enjoy watching?
Well, I'm a big Alistair Overeem fan. You know, I'm fortunate enough to be friends with him, and he's been an inspiration since the beginning. You know, back in his K1 days and the Pride days, he was one of the first fights I've watched. And I always find Alex, because I know how devastating he is. We train together. I know what he's like. And to watch him, you just never know what Alistair's going to turn up. And if the Demolition Man shows up, then yeah, it's always entertaining, you know.
I want to ask one final one from my side. Chai, you've got a big fight this coming Friday, of course, tomorrow evening. It is against Fabiano at Maldonado. What do we know of him? 26-14. Are you? I don't think you'll ever take anyone lightly, but you fancy your chances of maybe an early stoppage tomorrow night?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm not saying that as a generic, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to do this and do that. No, I do believe that I will be too much for him, but he has my full respect. He is a veteran who takes on any challenge, literally any challenge. And I cannot say a bad thing about somebody who's that game to step in there. Because it's tough just to even step in, but to step in against the competition he has and has, you know, gone the distance, hasn't been finished by them, I have to respect that. So it gives me more of an incentive to be the guy that puts him on his back.